The Trueflight Harness looked wrong on another woman. Nyra Quen stood beneath the lowest bronze ring of the High Dragon Aerie, with her wrists bound in pale servant cord, and watched Lady Nyra Thorne lift her arms for the royal attendants. The harness crossed Nyra's pearl-white riding gown in strips of gold-threaded leather and blackened bronze, polished until most of its old burns had vanished. Most, but not all. Nyra still saw the scorched left shoulder strap. She still saw the warped stitch near the spine loop, where her own fingers had tied a broken dragon lead during the Black Sun migration, when the sky went blind and 7 riders screamed for a guide no official record would ever name. The court saw a bride. Nyra saw theft wearing silk. "Lower your head, Sky," Kartak Vossile Wren said beside her. "A dismissed handler does not stare at royal property." Nyra did not lower her head. Above the Aerie, 12 dragons circled the capital in slow, thunderous rings. Their wing shadows crossed the mountain terraces, the banners, the nobles, the soldiers, and the thousands gathered below to witness the first royal flight of the Dragon King's bride. Cold wind moved through the bronze arches, carrying storm metal, dragon smoke, and fresh polished leather. Her leather, her skywrite. Vossile's thumb kept returning to the 3rd clasp mark on his scroll case. Not the 1st seal, not the royal seal. The 3rd, the place where a rider's name could be removed without breaking the law in public. "You are permitted to stand here because the Dragon King is merciful," Vossile said. "Do not mistake mercy for rank." Nyra looked at him. "Mercy does not steal a name and call it law." A few nobles turned. Nyra went still on the raised saddle platform. One attendant paused with his fingers near the final clasp. Vossile smiled thinly. "Your name was never written into Aerie law." "No," Nyra said. "You made sure of that." His smile held, but his thumb pressed harder against the 3rd mark on the scroll case. There was the fear. Not of Nyra. Not yet. Of the hidden place in the law where removal looked clean only when no dragon remembered. On the crown dais carved into the eastern wall, Dragon King Erynd Vale watched without speaking. He wore black riding armor instead of ceremonial robes, the obsidian dragonbone crown ring resting against his throat. Men bowed before his shadow touched them. Priests lowered their eyes before speaking his name. But his royal dragon did not look at the bride. Valor, the black war dragon of the Vale line, crouched behind the king with his wings folded tight and his head lowered toward the Aerie floor. Toward Nyra, Erynd noticed. Nyra saw his gaze shift from Valor to her bound wrists, then to the Trueflight Harness glowing across Nyra's chest. For one breath, doubt cut through his silence. Vossile stepped into that breath and killed it. "The sunset bell approaches, Majesty. If Lady Nyra completes the first circle before dusk, the flight rite is sealed." Nyra lifted her chin. She was beautiful, pale, expensive, and frightened enough to hide it. Nyra did not hate her. That made the humiliation sharper. Nyra had not erased the records, but she was willing to wear what another woman had earned because the court called it honor. The final attendant reached again for the 3rd sky clasp. "Do not touch that clasp," Nyra said. The court went quiet. Vossile turned. "You forget yourself." "No. I remember what that clasp is for. And what does a ground servant know of sacred harness law?" The words struck where he aimed them. Ground servant. Not rider. Not witness. Not guide. Not the woman who had crossed Black Sun air with lost dragons screaming behind her. Nyra felt the old wound open. But her voice did not. "A dragon will carry a rider's weight," she said, "but never a stolen sky name." The bronze rings above the Aerie answered with one low note. Several old riders went pale. The Trueflight Harness did not choose queens. It remembered the sky name that had survived inside it. Erynd stood. The movement silenced even the wind bells. "Untie her hands," Vosil bowed too slowly. Majesty, the former handler has disturbed the rite. If the transfer is delayed, House Thorn may read it as an insult. I said, untie her hands. The guard obeyed. Pain flashed through Nyra's wrists as the servant cord loosened. She did not rub the marks. She only opened her fingers and let the cold air touch the dents left in her skin. Erynd looked at those marks. He had signed the transfer without asking why the only handler Vale still watched had been dismissed. That silence sat between them now, heavier than mercy. Nyra's voice trembled from the platform. Is the harness unsafe? Nyra looked up at her. Not if it knows who is wearing it. Vosil gave a soft laugh. Old handler superstition. The harness belongs to the crown. The crown grants it, the bride wears it, the dragons obey. At the word obey, Valor's claws scraped stone. Erynd turned sharply. Valor. The black dragon did not look at him. The king's face hardened, but Nyra saw what he tried to hide. A command unanswered, a bond refusing a lie. Vosil raised both arms before anyone could think too long. Begin the flight. The ceremonial horn sounded. Nyra mounted Sorith, the copper dragon chosen for the first circle. The attendants locked the Trueflight Harness to the saddle rings. Sorith's nostrils flared. Her wings trembled once. She smelled the theft. Nyra stepped forward. 2 guards moved. Erynd's voice cut them still. Let her stand. It was not trust. It was not apology. But it was the first command he had placed between Nyra and another hand. The horn sounded again. Sorith leapt from the platform. The court erupted as the copper dragon dropped into open air, then rose above the capital in a bright, brutal sweep. Nyra's white gown streamed behind her. The Trueflight Harness flared gold across her body. For 3 breaths, the lie looked holy. Then the third. Skyclasp turned black. Nyra felt it under her ribs before the court saw it. An old knot tightened somewhere inside her, pulling memory through bone. Above the capital, Sorith screamed, not roared. Screamed. The dragons broke formation. One by one, every royal dragon turned on the bride. Not with flame, not with killing teeth. They lunged at the harness, ripping away glowing straps with claws and jaws, tearing the stolen outer knots from Nyra's body. Gold-threaded leather snapped in burning arcs. Nyra shrieked and clung to the saddle as one shoulder loop spun away like a falling star. Contamination, Vosil shouted. The handler cursed the rite. Nyra ignored him. She was watching the third clasp. It had sunk against Nyra's ribs, holding her to the saddle while every stolen name thread burned loose around it. The dragons were not killing the bride. They were removing the lie. Valor rose without Erynd's command. The black royal dragon opened his wings, vast enough to darken the platform, and lowered his head toward Nyra Quen. Then all 12 dragons abandoned the royal flight circle and turned back toward the dismissed servant standing below, and the third clasp on Nyra's ribs began spelling Nyra Quen's name in black fire. A noblewoman dropped her silver flight cup, and the wine fell upward. It rose in red beads through the High Dragon Aerie, snatched by the same violent wind that had stolen the court's cheering from its mouth. Below the open sky, silk banners cracked against their poles, priests clutched at bronze railings, riders reached for signal horns, and found their hands shaking too badly to lift them. Above the capital, Nyra Thorn's scream thinned into the vast air as Sorith bucked against a circle of dragons, tearing fire-lit straps from the Trueflight Harness. "Shoot the outer lines," Vosil Wren shouted. Skyhook archers along the western gallery raised their hooked bolts. Nyra moved before Erynd spoke. "No." The word struck cleanly through the chaos. She crossed the airy stone and stepped onto the lowest wind ring, where only sworn riders were allowed to stand during a live flight. Several guards surged toward her. Valor's head snapped up. Black smoke curled between his teeth, and every guard stopped as if a blade had been laid across his throat. Vossil's face twisted. "Get her off the ring." Erynd's voice came colder. "No one touches her." The order silenced half the platform and enraged the other half. Nyra did not look back to see which half Vossil belonged to. She kept her eyes on the sky. Nyra was not falling. That was the first truth. The dragons had ripped away the false outer knots, the bright ceremonial loops, the gold-threaded name straps that had been sewn over the old burn marks. But the third sky clasp had locked deep beneath Nyra's ribs and held her spine to Sorith's saddle. Black fire crawled from it in sharp little letters, vanishing before the court could read them all. Nyra could read them, not because the clasp loved her, not because it had chosen her as queen. The Trueflight Harness did not choose queens. It remembered the sky name that had survived inside it. "Do not shoot," Nyra said. "If a bolt touches that clasp, it will release her." One archer lowered his weapon. Vossil seized the nearest signal cord. "She is lying. The harness is cursed through her. Cut the blackened piece away." Nyra turned then. "Why are you afraid of the third clasp?" The question traveled farther than shouting. Vossil's thumb went at once to the third mark on his scroll case. He caught himself too late. Erynd saw it. So did 3 old riders near the eastern gallery. Vossil's recovery was swift. "Because it is killing the king's bride." "No," Nyra said. "It is the only reason she is still alive." Above them, Sorith rolled hard to the left. Nyra screamed again, and the court flinched as if fear could pull her down faster than gravity. Nyra lifted both hands into the wind, wrists still marked from the cord, fingers spread in an old migration signal no court instructor had taught in years. "Hold wing." Sorith's left wing snapped wide. The copper dragon steadied. A sound passed through the galleries. Not applause, not belief, but the first break in certainty. Erynd stepped closer to the wind ring. His shadow fell across Nyra's shoulder, but he did not block her from the sky. "What did you just do?" he asked. Nyra did not turn. "I asked her to stop fighting the thing that is saving her." "Asked," Vossil spat. "Listen to her, Majesty. She speaks as if royal dragons answer dismissed servants." Valor gave a low growl from behind the dais. Erynd looked at his dragon, and something darkened in his face. 6 years of unanswered commands. 6 years of believing his royal dragon had gone stubborn, wild, perhaps half-mad from war. Now, the beast stood behind him, calmer under Nyra's voice than under his crown. "Can you bring Nyra down?" he asked. Nyra's throat tightened. There it was. The request everyone had known would come, not from the court, not from Vossil, from the Dragon King himself, in front of every witness who had watched her name removed. She could say yes and become useful again. She could save the bride, lower her head, and let Vossil call it proof that servants existed to repair noble mistakes. So Nyra lifted her chin. "I can keep her alive," she said. "I can guide Sorith low enough for landing, but I will not do it as the dismissed handler you erased. If I command the ring without a spoken sky name, the law will call it trespass. If she falls, Vossil will blame me for touching what he stole." The court went still. Vossil's eyes sharpened. "This is extortion." "No," Nyra said. "This is Aerie law. A rider's name must be spoken before a live flight command can be entered into the wind ring. You know that. You used the third clasp because it let you remove my name where the public record would not show blood." His mouth tightened. Erynd stared at her, as though every word cost him something. "Name your demand," he said. Nyra looked up at Nyra, suspended between death and truth. The bride was terrified, but not guilty enough to die for Vossil's lie. Nyra would not make another woman's body the price of being heard. "Speak the sky name you erased," Nyra said. "Say before the court who earned first right to the Trueflight Harness. Then I will guide her down." The wind rang through the bronze arches. Vossil moved fast. Too fast. He drew a black-edged law knife from inside his sleeve and slashed the signal cord tied to the western skyhook line. A hooked bolt fired before any archer touched it, screaming across the open air toward Nyra's ribs, toward the third sky clasp. Nyra stepped fully into the wind ring, and every bronze ring in the High Dragon Aerie began to turn. The hooked bolt stopped one handspan from Nyra's ribs. It hung in open air with its black iron tip aimed at the third sky clasp, vibrating against a force no archer had loosed and no priest had blessed. The wind around it folded inward, bronze dust lifted from the airy floor. Every ring above the platform gave a deeper note, and the sound pressed against the court until silk sleeves trembled and old riders reached for the scars beneath their gloves. Nyra stood inside the wind ring with her marked wrists raised. She had not touched the bolt. That mattered. If she had touched it, Vossile would have called it proof. If she had broken it, he would have named it sabotage. So she held herself still and let the old law do what it had been built to do, ask for the name. The lowest bronze ring turned once above her head. A line of black fire opened along its inner rim, thin as a cut. Letters formed, ancient and severe. Sky name required. The court went silent. Vossile recovered first. A malfunction. The ring is responding to contamination from the handler's presence. Nyra did not take her eyes off the suspended bolt. Then remove me from the ring and watch the bolt finish its path. No one moved. Above the capital, Nyra clung to Sorith's saddle with both hands, her white gown torn by wind, her face no longer proud enough to hide terror. Sorith's wings strained against the unstable circle. The other dragons hovered too close, teeth bared, not at the bride, but at the last false strands, still smoking from the harness. Erynd descended the final step from the crown dais. The court parted for him, as if the stone itself had learned fear. He stopped at the edge of the wind ring, close enough that Nyra could feel the cold force of him at her shoulder, not touching her, not shielding her from view, but standing where any blade meant for her would have to pass him first. His eyes lifted to the bronze letters, then to Valor. The black dragon watched Nyra with absolute stillness. Erynd's jaw tightened. What name must be spoken? Vossile turned sharply. Majesty, this is precisely what she wants. If you speak anything now, she will twist emergency mercy into restored right. Nyra's voice stayed level. No. If he does not speak it, Nyra may die under a theft she did not understand. That struck harder than accusation. Nyra heard it from the sky. Her frightened eyes turned toward Nyra, and for the first time since the ceremony began, she looked less like a bride and more like a woman discovering the dress around her had been stitched from another woman's skin. Erynd looked at Nyra. You are still willing to save her. I am not willing to be used silently. The words held between them. He had expected bitterness, perhaps even vengeance. The court had expected it too. A dismissed servant should have wanted the bride to fall. A humiliated woman should have become the monster they could punish. But Nyra stood in the ring and demanded law, not blood. That unsettled Erynd more than anger would have. He turned to the court. Nyra Quen, he said. Vossile's face drained. The bronze ring brightened. Erynd's voice did not rise, but it carried to every gallery, every saddle tier, every rider clinging to the railings. Nyra Quen earned first right to the Trueflight Harness. The old riders bowed their heads before they could stop themselves. Nyra felt the name enter the ring like breath entering lungs after drowning. The air changed. The bolt shook violently, then cracked down the middle and fell in two harmless pieces toward the empty sky beneath Nyra's feet. Nyra did not thank him. Not yet. Recognition spoken under duress was not repair. It was the door to repair, nothing more. She lifted both hands and turned her palms outward in the migration signal for low descent. Sorith! Hold wing! Follow lower ring! The copper dragon's scream broke into a ragged snarl. Her right wing dipped, then steadied. The other dragons widened their circle, still furious, but no longer tearing. They gave Sorith air. Nyra began to descend. A sob escaped someone in House Thorn's gallery. Vossile stepped forward, his sleeve slipping back from his left wrist. Nyra saw a thin black burn there, shaped like half a knot. He hid it quickly, but not before Erynd saw. "Majesty," Vossile said, "too calm now. An emergency sky name does not restore legal ownership. The handler has saved the bride. Let that service be rewarded after the flight. The transfer remains sealed once Lady Nyra lands." "No," Nyra said. Sorith dropped another careful ring lower. Vossile's eyes cut to her. Nyra lowered one hand, but kept the other in command. "The transfer cannot seal while the third clasp is black. That clasp is damaged. It is remembering." The bronze ring above her turned again. More letters formed. "Third clasp holds removal witness." A murmur broke across the court. Vossile's thumb returned to the third mark on his scroll case, again and again, until the gesture looked less like habit and more like panic wearing discipline. Erynd saw it fully now. "What is a removal witness?" Nyra finally turned from the sky. "It is the hand that took a rider's name out of the harness," she said. "Not the king who signed the transfer, not the bride who wore it. The hand that knew where to cut." The wind ring answered with a sound like leather pulled tight in flame. Above them, the third sky clasp opened one black tooth. A thread of fire dropped from Nyra's ribs, not downward, but across the air toward the platform. It stretched past Nyra, past Erynd, and fastened itself to Vossile Wren's hidden wrist. Vossile tried to hide his wrist. The black fire tightened before his sleeve could fall. It looped once around the pale skin beneath his glove, thin as a written line and cruel as wire, then burned through the silk without touching the flesh beneath. The court saw the mark now. Not a wound from battle, not a priest's seal. A half-knot scar, old and dark, shaped exactly like the hidden cut inside the third sky clasp. "Do not move," Erynd said. Vossile froze. No one mistook the Dragon King's voice for ceremony now. The cold had left it. Something more dangerous had taken its place. Above the Aerie, Sorith descended another broken circle, carrying Nyra through wind that still fought the stolen harness. Nyra kept one hand raised toward the dragon, and one hand angled toward the bronze ring beneath her feet. Every muscle in her arm trembled. Holding a live descent while Aerie Law opened a removal witness was like standing between two storms and asking both to wait. Nyra's voice came thinly from above. "Get me down." "I am," Nyra said. Vossile seized on that. "Then finish it. Finish the descent before this spectacle kills her." Nyra did not look at him. "You want her landed before the clasp finishes speaking." "I want the future queen alive." "You wanted her sealed inside a stolen flight, right before sunset." The bronze ring answered with a low scrape. Erynd stepped closer to Vossile. "Show your wrist." Vossile's mouth tightened. "Majesty, every sky Kartark bears legal burns. I have recorded thousands of harness transfers. This proves nothing except that I served the crown. Then you will not mind the court seeing it." For a moment, hatred showed through Vossile's obedience. He drew back his sleeve. The mark on his wrist was not one scar but 3 layered cuts burned into a single black knot. The first cut was clean. The second had healed crooked. The third looked unfinished, as if something had bitten the law before it could close. Nyra's breath caught. She remembered that broken shape. Not from the court records. Those had been sealed. Not from the public rolls. Her name had never entered them. She remembered it from the last hour of the Black Sun migration, when the western flight vanished behind a sky without light. Vossile saw memory move across her face. He smiled very slightly. "Careful, handler. Grief makes liars of survivors." Erynd turned on him. "Enough." But Nyra lifted her hand, stopping the king without touching him. The gesture was small, The effect was not. Erynd stopped because she had asked, and half the court saw it. Nyra kept her eyes on Vocile. "You did not remove my name after the migration." The fire thread around his wrist pulsed. "You removed it during." A sharp murmur cut across the galleries. Vocile laughed. "Impossible. No flight. Right can be altered in active black sun air. No public flight." "Right," Nyra said. "But the third clasp was built for emergency removal, for dead riders, for names that had to be released when nobody returned." The wind ring turned beneath her feet. The letters along the bronze rim changed. "Dead rider removal requires witness." Nyra's jaw tightened. "I was not dead." Sorith dipped suddenly. Nyra cried out. Nyra snapped her raised hand toward the sky. "Hold lower wing. Breathe through the saddle." The copper dragon obeyed. Not perfectly, not gently, but enough. Erynd watched Sorith steady beneath Nyra's command, and the realization struck him harder than any accusation could have. This was not servant instinct, not luck, not old handler superstition. This was a rider speaking through a law his court had told him she had never earned. His face changed. Nyra did not soften for it. Vocile stepped back. The fire thread dragged his wrist forward. "Majesty, she is manipulating the ring. She has had years to poison the harness with her resentment." Erynd's eyes did not leave the black knot on Vocile's wrist. "And I had years to ask why my dragon watched the woman you dismissed." Silence fell. The words were not enough. Nyra knew that. Erynd knew it too. But they landed in the Aerie as the first public crack in the version of history Vocile had polished clean. Vocile's control slipped. "You signed the transfer." Erynd's gaze cut to him. Vocile had spoken too quickly. The bronze ring heard it. A second line of black fire opened above the first. Royal signature entered after name removal. The court turned toward the king. Erynd did not look away. Shame would have been easier if it had come alone. But power made shame heavier. His seal had not cut Nyra's name from the harness, but it addressed the theft in crown authority. He had not asked. He had not doubted. He had accepted the clean record, because a clean record served the alliance. He looked at Nyra then. "I signed after the wound was hidden," he said. "But I signed." The air between them tightened. Nyra heard no apology in it. Good. She did not want words shaped like sorrow, while Nyra still hung from the sky, and Vocile still stood with his wrist bound to proof. She wanted the law open. She wanted the truth where the court could not politely step around it. "Then keep him from touching his scroll case," she said. Erynd moved before Vocile did. Vocile's right hand had already dropped toward the case at his belt. Erynd caught his wrist and twisted it away. The scroll case fell, struck the stone, and rolled into the wind ring. Every bronze ring in the Aerie stopped turning. The silence was worse than the noise. Nyra stared at the scroll case. Its third mark had split open. Inside, not parchment, but a narrow strip of blackened harness leather, uncoiled by itself. It dragged across the stone like something wounded finding its way home. Burned knots covered it from end to end. Each knot held a tiny spark of trapped sky. Old riders began backing away. Vocile's face lost all color. "That is restricted war evidence." "No," Nyra said softly. "That is the missing migration strip." The strip reached the edge of the wind ring and rose into the air. Sorith gave a terrible shudder above them. The third clasp on Nyra's ribs opened wider, answering the strip with black fire. For one breath, the Aerie smelled not of polished leather and ceremony, but of the black sun migration. Burned clouds, frozen ash, dragon blood on wind, and the blind terror of wings beating where no stars remained. Then a voice came out of the leather. "Not Nyra's, Vocile's. Remove the guide name before the western flight returns," the memory said. "If the riders die, the crown loses nothing. If she survives, the law must not remember her. Nyra's raised hand faltered, and every dragon above the High Dragon Aerie began to descend with murder in its wings. The smallest bell in the western arch cracked first. Its bronze throat split from rim to crown, spilling a harsh, broken note over the High Dragon Aerie. Nobles ducked beneath gallery rails. Priests dragged ceremonial charts against their chests, as if parchment could shield them from dragonfire. Riders shouted over one another, some calling for chains, some for bows, some for the old killing horns sealed beneath the eastern stair. Nyra heard none of them clearly. She heard wings. 12 sets of them, beating lower through the storm-white air, no longer circling in ceremony but descending in a hunter's spiral. Their eyes burned toward Vocile Wren. Their teeth showed. Their throats glowed with banked fire, and the heat of it struck the Aerie before the flames did. Vocile staggered back, the black fire thread still fastened to his wrist. "Majesty," he gasped. "Control them." Erynd did not answer at once. For the first time in years, the Dragon King looked at his own sky and understood that command was not the same as loyalty. Valor stood behind him with wings half open, not waiting for Erynd's order, not resisting it either, waiting for Nyra. That terrified the court more than fire. Nyra stepped deeper into the windring. Pain cut through her marked wrists as the bronze law recognized the name Erynd had spoken. The ring accepted her presence now, but acceptance was not gentleness. Old Aerie law entered the body like altitude, thinning breath, sharpening bone, making every choice cost something. She lifted both hands. "Hold, Fleam." The words were not loud. The dragons heard. Fire dimmed in 12 throats, not gone, only banked. The hunter's spiral slowed. Sorith shuddered above the platform, still carrying Maelira, still bound by the black third clasp. The bride had stopped screaming. She stared down at Nyra with the stunned horror of someone realizing the woman she had allowed to be humiliated was now the only reason she still had a sky beneath her. Vocile seized the pause. "You see?" he shouted, voice cracking into triumph. "She commands them. She could always command them. She hid it from the crown. She let the Black Sun Riders die and kept power for herself." The accusation landed where fear was already waiting. Several nobles turned toward Nyra. That was Vocile's gift. He knew how to pour poison into an open wound. Nyra lowered one hand just enough to keep Sorith steady and turned toward the blackened migration strip hanging in the air. It still smoked with trapped memory. Vocile's voice had come from it once. One order, one truth. But one truth could be buried if the court panicked loudly enough. "No," she said. "Let it finish." Vocile's eyes flashed. "The evidence is restricted. The evidence is alive." The bronze ring beneath her feet turned half a circle. A new line burned along its rim. Trueflight witness may call full air. Old riders inhaled sharply. Erynd looked at the words, then at Nyra. "What is a Trueflight witness?" Vocile answered first. "An extinct emergency rank. A superstition from before Crown law was standardized." Nyra's mouth tightened. "A Trueflight witness is the rider who keeps formation when sky, map, horn, and crown command all fail." The migration strip pulsed. The air above it darkened. The High Dragon Aerie vanished from the memory for one breath, replaced by black sun sky. No daylight, no stars, no horizon. Only ash wind and the terrible shapes of dragons flying blind. The court saw shadows of riders scattered in the dark, signal lines snapping one by one. They heard dragons calling names no one had written in the royal death rolls. They saw a younger Nyra clinging to the spine harness of a storm-grey dragon. Blood running from one ear, one hand tied into a broken lead, the other signaling through air no human eye could read. Then Vocile's voice cut through the memory. "Remove the guide name before the western flight returns." The memory shifted. A law knife flashed. a hand marked with the same half-knot scar, pressed against the third clasp. Nyra's name burned inside the harness, bright and whole. Then, Vocile cut it loose. Melira sobbed above them. He cut her name while she was still flying. No one told her to be silent. Vocile lunged for the migration strip. Erynd caught him by the throat and drove him back against the stone pillar hard enough to crack the blue-black chart tiles behind him. Gasps broke through the court. Vocile clawed at the king's wrist, but Erynd did not tighten enough to kill. Not yet. "Do not touch that proof," Erynd said. The words were quiet. That made them worse. Nyra felt the ring pull at her again. The law wanted the full heir. Full heir meant every surviving fragment, every command, every rider lost, every dragon abandoned. It would expose Vocile, yes. It would also expose what Nyra had hidden, that she had surrendered her official mark after the migration, not from guilt, but because the returning dragons were so close to revolt that one crowned lie might have burned the capital to bone. Erynd saw her hesitate. Not fear. Cost. "You do not have to protect my court from its own truth," he said. Nyra looked at him then. There was no softness in his face, no easy apology, no claim over her pain. Only recognition, harsh and late, but real enough to stand on. "I am not protecting your court," she said. "I am protecting the dragons from being called monsters for remembering what men did." Then she turned both palms toward the migration strip. "Full air," Nyra commanded. The blackened leather unfurled. Names burst from it in burning lines. Not one, not 7, but 43 rider names, and the dragon names tied beside them. The air filled with their last formation calls. The court listened as the abandoned western flight begged for a landing corridor. They listened as Vocile ordered the corridor sealed. They listened as Nyra's younger voice cut through the dark afterward, refusing retreat, calling each dragon by name, guiding the survivors home through a sky that had no moon and no law left inside it. The bronze ring beneath her feet blazed. Last Trueflight witness recognized. The words burned so bright that even the dragons drew back. Nyra swayed. Erynd stepped toward her, but stopped before touching her. This time he understood. She had not asked to be held. She had asked to be heard. Across the platform, Vocile laughed. It was a broken sound, but it carried. "Recognized," he said. "Then let the witness answer for every rider she did not bring home." His free hand opened. A second law knife slid from his sleeve and struck the wind ring at Nyra's feet. The bronze split beneath her, and the names of the 43 dead riders turned their fire toward Nyra Quen. The crack in the wind ring widened without breaking the stone. It opened like a dark mouth beneath Nyra's boots, and the 43 burning rider names leaned toward her all at once. Their fire did not spread across the court. It gathered. It narrowed. It found the woman standing inside the split law and poured its heat against her chest. Several nobles cried out in relief, not because she was safe, because blame had found someone lower than the crown. Vocile Wren straightened slowly, blood at the corner of his mouth where Erynd had thrown him against the pillar. "A Trueflight witness answers for the formation," he said. "That is old law, Majesty. Older than your crown. If she claims the rank, let her carry the deaths." The dead names burned brighter. Nyra's knees almost bent, not from guilt, from recognition. Every name had a weight. Every name had a wingbeat attached to it. She remembered Alren Voss losing his left stirrup and laughing once because fear had made him foolish. She remembered Tessa Mar dropping her signal horn into black air. She remembered old Brannick calling his dragon sweet girl while ash filled his lungs. Vocile thought grief would make her defend herself. Instead, Nyra opened her hands. "I will answer them," she said. Erynd turned sharply. "Nyra." It was the first time he had spoken her name without law forcing it. She heard that. She did not look at him. "If I refuse," she said. He will say I took the rank only when it gave me power." Vosil smiled. "Then answer." The bronze ring groaned beneath her. Black fire climbed the old dents on her wrists where the servant cord had been. The dead rider names circled once, then struck. Nyra did not scream. The court wanted her to. She felt their hunger for it, almost as sharply as the fire. They wanted pain to simplify the truth. If she broke, she was dangerous. If she begged, she was guilty. If she fell, Vosil could step over her and call the law satisfied. So she stood. The first name burned across her collarbone. Alrinbos. A final memory opened in the air. A rider reaching through black sun wind, a dragon rolling blind. A landing corridor flaring in the distance, then shutting like an eye. The court saw it. Vosil saw it too. His smile faltered. The second name struck. Tis Samar. Another memory. Another corridor light closing. Another dragon thrown back into dark air because the western landing chain had been sealed from inside the capital. Nyra breathed through the pain. "Do not show only their deaths," she whispered to the ring. "Show what they were denied." The ring answered. Every bronze arch in the High Dragon Aerie flared with old landing lights, not gold, but black blue, the color of signal flame seen through storm. One by one, the dead names turned away from Nyra and toward the western gallery, toward the locked sky chain mounted there. Erynd followed the light with his eyes. "What is that chain?" No one answered. Vosil moved. Nyra saw his hand drop toward the second law knife still hidden at his belt, but Erynd reached him first. The Dragon King seized Vosil's wrist and forced it open before the blade cleared the sleeve. "Enough hidden steel," Erynd said. Vosil's breath shook. "Majesty, she is twisting the dead against us." "No," Nyra said, voice rough now. "They are looking at the door they were refused." The word door was wrong for sky, but no other word fit. The western sky chain controlled the emergency descent corridor during Black Sun flight. If opened, dragons could follow its pull home even without stars. If sealed, the sky became wall. Erynd's face darkened. Who held authority over the western sky chain? Vosil said nothing. The dead names answered. They struck the bronze arch above the western gallery, and a hidden inscription burned through 6 years of polish. Sealed by Sky Kartak command. The court recoiled. Malira's voice broke from above. "He locked them out?" Sorith dipped again. Weaker now, her wings exhausted from holding between panic and law. Nyra lifted one shaking hand toward her. "Lower ring," she commanded. "Slow breath. Follow my right." The copper dragon obeyed, but barely. Malira slid hard against the saddle. The third clasp held her, black fire still spelling Nyra's name across its teeth. Vosil saw the strain and changed tactics at once. "The bride is dying while she performs theater," he shouted. "If Nyra Quen truly cared for life, she would land her instead of parading old ghosts." That cut, because it was almost true. Nyra could not hold the dead, the ring, the exposed chain, and Sorith forever. Her arms trembled, her breath came thin. The law had recognized her, but recognition did not spare the body it used. Erynd stepped into the wind ring. The bronze fire snapped toward him. "No," Nyra said. He stopped, with one boot over the broken line. Pain flashed across his face, but he did not step back. "Tell me what to do." The court heard him. So did Vosil. Dragon King Erynd Vale, who had signed her erasure without question, stood at the edge of the law and asked the dismissed handler for command. Nyra looked at him then. "You cannot command the ring for me. I know. You cannot repair this by standing in front of me. I know. Then stand where Vosil cannot reach the chain." Erynd turned at once. Not offended, not softened. Obedient to the work, not to her pain. Something in Nyra's chest tightened harder than the fire. She faced the western arch and pressed both palms downward. Full air has heard the dead. Now count the living. The dead names shuddered. Vossile went still. That was the mistake hidden beneath all his others. He had counted riders. He had counted public records. He had counted names he could cut and seals he could move. He had not counted dragons. The bronze rings turned again. 43 rider names lifted higher, and beneath them, another set of names began to appear. Dragon names. Not dead. Not gone. Surviving dragons from the Western Flight, marked as lost in the official rolls, though their wings had returned under Nyra's command. Valor raised his head. His name burned first. Valor of the Vale line. Western Flight survivor. Erynd stopped beneath the western chain as if the words had struck him through the ribs. Nyra's voice dropped. Your dragon was there. Valor opened his wings. The black war dragon's scarred chest glowed with the same black-blue landing light from the sealed corridor. He had not been disobedient for 6 years because he was wild. He had been remembering a command that left him to die. Vossile lunged for the chain. Erynd caught him and drove him to the stone. But Vossile laughed into the impact and opened his bloodied hand. A third law knife was already gone. Across the gallery, the western sky chain split. The emergency corridor opened all at once, not toward the Aerie, but outward into black sun dark that should have died 6 years ago, and something vast began climbing back through it. The western gallery emptied before anyone ordered it. Nobles fled from the split sky chain as black sun wind poured through the breach, cold enough to frost the bronze railings and violent enough to tear prayer veils from the dragon priest's hands. The air beyond the chain should have shown the capital terraces, the mountain roads, the dusk-lit river far below. Instead, it opened into a dead piece of sky. No sun, no stars, only ash, dark cloud, turning slowly around the shape climbing through it. Not a dragon, not at first. A wing appeared, torn down to its glowing bones. Then a horned skull crowned in old signal chains. Then a rib cage wide enough to hold a war tower, each bone burning with black-blue landing fire. It dragged itself out of the dead corridor like a memory too large to stay buried. Nyra screamed again, but this time even Sorith screamed with her. The black sun remnant, one old rider whispered. Vossile, pinned beneath Erynd's hand, went utterly still. Nyra heard that stillness more clearly than the panic. The creature rising through the corridor was not an enemy accident. It was the thing Vossile had counted on no one surviving long enough to name. Valor stepped forward. The black war dragon did not attack. He lowered his scarred head, and a sound came from his throat that was almost grief. Nyra's knees weakened. She knew that skeletal dragon, not by body. The body had been burned away by black sun air. She knew the rhythm of its wing. She knew the old crack in the left horn. She knew the way it tilted its skull before landing, always half a breath ahead of command. Orath, she whispered. The dead dragon's empty eye sockets turned toward her. The entire High Dragon Aerie shook. Vossile found his voice. Majesty, now you see what she hid. She brought a death dragon back to the capital. She kept black sun corruption alive inside the harness. The court was ready to believe him. Fear always wanted a face. Nyra's face was easier to blame than Vossile's records, easier than the king's signature, easier than 43 dead names burning above them. The same nobles who had watched the bride wear stolen glory now backed away from Nyra as if her grief had claws. Erynd's hand tightened on Vossile's throat. You opened the corridor to expose her, Vossile rasped. To save your crown from the creature she commands. I do not command him, Nyra said. The words hurt more than fire. Orath had been the lead dragon of the Western Flight. He had carried 3 wounded riders on his back after their saddles failed. He had flown behind Nyra's signals through black air until the emergency corridor sealed before his face. Nyra had called him home until her voice broke. He had answered until there was no sky left between them. Now the remnant climbed toward the Aerie, dragging sealed chains from the dark. The bronze ring beneath Nyra's feet flared. Unlanded dead require witness. No, Vossile said. It was the first honest fear he had shown. Nyra understood why. The dead riders had shown the sealed corridor. The surviving dragons had shown the lie. But an unlanded dead dragon carried the final moment. Not the order, not the record, the moment of refusal. The face of whoever watched him reach the corridor and chose not to open it. Orath's skull passed fully through the chain. Black sun wind struck the platform hard enough to throw several courtiers down. Nyra staggered, but Erynd moved behind her, one arm lifting without touching her body, bracing the space so she could catch herself against air instead of stone. "Tell me how to close it," he said. Nyra looked at the remnant. "It did not come to be closed. What does it want? A landing?" Vossile laughed, high and desperate. "A dead thing cannot land." Nyra looked at him. "That is why it has not stopped flying." The words silenced the nearest riders. Above them, Maelira slipped lower in the saddle as Sorith's strength failed. The third clasp held, but the copper dragon could not hover forever. The living bride needed descent. The dead dragon needed witness. The broken chain needed closing. Nyra could not hold all three. Vossile saw it. He twisted beneath Erynd and shouted toward Housethorn's gallery. "If she chooses the dead, your bride falls. If she chooses the bride, the death dragon enters the capital. This is the truth of forbidden witnesses. They save ghosts and murder the living." Maelira sobbed. "Please." Nyra closed her eyes for one breath. There was no clean choice. That was Vossile's real weapon. Not knives, not forged records. He knew how to make a woman's mercy look like guilt, whichever way she turned. Erynd drew his blade and pressed it beneath Vossile's jaw. "Give me the closing command." Vossile smiled through blood. "Kill the witness." The words dropped into the Aerie like a stone into deep water. The bronze rings dimmed. Erynd Vale still. The law accepted the answer. That was the horror of it. A Trueflight witness could close an unlanded dead corridor with her own death. Her name would anchor the landing. Her body would pay the gap. The capital would be saved. The bride would survive. The court would weep later and call it noble, clean, convenient. Nyra felt the old law turn its face toward her, offer witness body to close black sun air. The letters burned around her feet. Erynd stepped fully into the ring then. Fire climbed his armor. He did not retreat. No, the word was not loud. It was absolute. Nyra turned on him. "Step out." "No, you cannot order this law." "I am not ordering it." Black fire bit into the crown ring at his throat. His jaw tightened, but he held his ground between Nyra and the burning letters. "I signed the lie that brought us here," he said, eyes on the court now, not on her. "If Aerie law wants a royal price, it can start with the hand that sealed the theft." For one suspended breath, no one moved. Then Velor roared. The sound split the storm. The royal dragon leapt over the wind ring and landed between Nyra and Orath's skeletal head, wings flaring wide, scarred chest glowing with the same black-blue light as the dead corridor. He lowered his throat, exposing the old migration scar. Not to attack, to offer witness. Nyra's heart lurched. "Velor." "No." The black dragon looked back at her, and in his eyes, for the first time, Nyra saw not obedience, not worship, but memory asking to be finished. The bronze rings turned again. Living survivor may answer unlanded dead. Vossile screamed, "No!" He lunged for the split sky chain, with the last hidden blade in his hand. Erynd caught him before he reached it, but not before the knife flew. It struck the third sky clasp, still holding Maelira to Sorith. The clasp opened, and the Dragon King's bride fell from the sky. A white riding ribbon struck the airy stone before Nyra did. It fluttered across the wind ring, torn from her gown, bright and useless against the black fire crawling around Nyra's feet. Above, the bride dropped through open air with both arms reaching for a harness no longer fastened to her body. Sorith dove after her, but the copper dragon's wings were tangled by panic and the sudden release of the third clasp. Valor roared from the broken ring. Orath's skeletal head turned in the dead corridor, and every bronze arch in the High Dragon Aerie screamed for a witness body. Nyra moved, not toward the bride, toward the third clasp. It spun through the air between Nyra and Sorith, black as a coal with Nyra's name still burning across its teeth. Vossal's knife had opened it, but opening was not the same as emptying. The clasp remembered. The clasp held the last clean line between theft and truth. Nyra thrust one hand into the wind and caught it. Fire closed around her fingers. Erynd shouted her name. Pain ran up Nyra's arm so sharply the world flashed white. She nearly dropped the clasp. Nearly. But nearly had never saved a dragon in black sun air. She locked her burned fingers around the bronze and stepped to the cracked center of the wind ring. No body, she said through her teeth, pays for a name that was stolen. The law flared. Vossile, pinned beneath Erynd, lifted his bloodied face. That is not a command. Nyra looked at the falling bride. It is now. She drove the third clasp into the crack beneath her feet. The wind ring buckled. Black fire shot outward in 12 lines, one toward each living dragon. The dragons did not attack. They caught the lines in their teeth, their claws, their saddle horns, their scarred wing bones. Sorith caught the strongest line across her chest and snapped into a hard downward dive, no longer fighting the harness memory, but following it. Nyra raised her unburned hand. Catch rider. Sorith folded both wings and dropped faster. Nyra fell into the space above the dragon's neck. For one awful breath, she missed the saddle. Then the black fire line wrapped around her waist and dragged her against Sorith's spine with brutal precision. She screamed, but she lived. Sorith's claws struck the lower landing rail, tearing bronze from stone as she crashed onto the emergency platform beneath the main aerie. House Thorn erupted in sobs. Nyra did not let herself look long. The dead corridor widened. Orath's skeletal body dragged another length of itself from the black sun sky, wing bones scraping against the western chain. The law around Nyra changed. Angry now. Denied its oldest answer. The letters at her feet twisted. Witness body refused. Because the witness is not the debt, Nyra said. The sealed landing is. The bronze rings shuddered. Vossile went still again. Nyra felt the truth beneath the law like a buried current. Vossile had wanted her killed because a dead witness would close the corridor without asking why it had opened. A sacrificed woman made such a clean ending. The court could mourn. The bride could live. The king could remain king. And the abandoned dragon would vanish back into black sun air, carrying the last proof with him. Nyra would not give them that mercy. She turned toward Orath. The dead dragon lowered his skull until his hollow eyes faced her across the wind ring. Cold black sun ash blew over her cheeks. She remembered flying behind him. She remembered shouting until blood filled her throat. She remembered cutting her own official mark from the return roll afterward because the surviving dragons had come home ready to burn every tower that had sealed the western chain. She had chosen silence then to stop a revolt. Vossile had mistaken that silence for surrender. I did not hide you because I was ashamed, she whispered to Orath. I hid the truth because the living dragons would have destroyed the capital before the dead were named. Valor bowed his head beside the dead remnant. One by one, the surviving dragons did the same. Erynd saw it. So did the court. Not worship, not obedience. Witness. Nyra lifted the third clasp with both hands, though the burned fingers trembled. Orath of the Western Flight, she called. Lead dragon, unlanded dead. I offer not my body, but the sky name that was cut from your return." The clasp opened. Nyra's name burned out of it in a long black ribbon, not erased now, not hidden, but whole. It rose above the Aerie and stretched toward the dead corridor. Orath touched it with the edge of his skeletal jaw. The black sun wind stopped. For the first time in 6 years, the dead dragon descended, not into the capital, not into destruction, into the High Dragon Aerie itself, where the bronze rings lowered like a landing path around him. His bone claws touched the broken wind ring. The entire mountain bowed under the weight of a landing that should have happened years ago. The fire around the dead rider names softened. Vossiel made a sound low in his throat. "No." Nyra turned to him. Now the law can ask who refused him ground. The third clasp snapped shut. The bronze rings spun so fast their edges blurred into circles of black fire. One final command carved itself across every arch in the High Dragon Aerie. Public air required. Then Orath opened his skeletal mouth, and the last memory of the Black Sun migration began to speak. Every balcony in the High Dragon Aerie opened at once, not by servants, not by command. Bronze shutters folded outward along the galleries, exposing the court to the thousands gathered on the mountain terraces below. The capital saw everything now. The torn royal banners, the bride collapsed alive on the lower landing rail, the dead dragon kneeling inside the cracked wind ring, and Nyra Quen standing before him with the third sky clasp burned into her hands. Public air required. The law would not whisper anymore. Vossiel Wren understood before the rest of them did. His face changed, not with fear this time, but calculation. He looked at the open balconies, the watching capital, the old riders, the living dragons, the Dragon King, and finally Nyra. Then his expression settled into something colder than panic. "If this memory speaks," he said, "the court will not survive what follows." Nyra's burned fingers tightened around the clasp. "The Western Flight did not survive your silence. The Western Flight was already lost." Orath's skeletal jaws opened. Black-blue fire spilled from between his teeth. Not flame for burning, but memory given shape. It stretched across the Aerie in a wide sheet of dark light, and the High Dragon Aerie vanished behind another sky. The court saw the Black Sun migration as the dead had seen it. No horizon, no stars, no ground. Dragons flew through ash so thick their wings cut tunnels in the dark. Riders shouted until their voices broke. Signal horns failed one by one. The Western Flight staggered toward a distant chain of landing lights, the only safe corridor left in the blind sky. Nyra's younger voice tore through the memory. "Open Western descent. Orath carries wounded. Valor is burned. 3 saddles broken. Open the chain." The memory shifted to the Western Gallery 6 years earlier. Vossiel Wren stood beside the sky chain controls, younger but unmistakable, his robes whipped by black sun wind. Around him, officers shouted conflicting orders. Dragon priests begged for the corridor to open. Through the dark beyond the chain, Orath appeared, carrying broken riders across his spine, Valor flying bloodied at his left. Nyra's voice called again, "Open the chain." Vossiel did not. He looked back toward the capital towers, where thousands of citizens crouched under storm shields, terrified by the returning dragons screaming in black sun air. He looked at the riders approaching with too much fire, too much grief, too much proof. Then he placed his hand over the third emergency seal. "If they land like that," the memory of Vossiel said, "the surviving dragons will burn every noble house that ordered the migration." A priest beside him whispered, "They are our riders," Vossiel answered. "They are witnesses." Then he sealed the chain. A sound moved through the present court that was almost too human for such a place. Not shock, not grief, recognition, arriving too late. In the memory, Orath struck the closed corridor first. His body broke against invisible law, wing bones folding around wounded riders to shield them from the impact. Vale slammed into the sealed air beside him and fell back into the dark. Nyra's signal line whipped across the storm, catching Vale's harness, pulling him and the surviving dragons away before the closed chain could crush them too. Then came the final cut. Vossile pressed his burned thumb against the third clasp record and spoke the words that had shaped 6 years of silence. Remove Nyra Quen from the return. Mark the guide name unverified. If she survives as handler only. The memory broke. The capital outside the balconies had gone silent. No cheering, no bells, no crowd noise rising from below. The people had heard the order. The riders had heard the order. House Thorn had heard the order. Nyra, pale and shaking on the lower rail, had heard the order, while the torn remnants of stolen glory smoked around her. Vossile stood very still. Then he smiled. "You think this condemns only me?" he asked. "Look at your king." Erynd did not move. Vossile lifted his bound wrist toward the open balconies. "Yes, I sealed the chain. I cut the guide name. I preserved the capital from dragon revolt. But Dragon King Erynd Vale accepted the corrected record. He signed the transfer. He gave the harness to his bride. He built today's ceremony on the silence I handed him. The words landed cleanly because they were true." Nyra felt the court turn toward Erynd, some with accusation, some with relief. A king made a better shield than a Kartark. If blame rose high enough, perhaps no one else had to look at their own hands. Erynd stepped into public air. He did not draw his blade. He did not look to Vale for majesty. He stood before the open galleries with the black crown ring at his throat and let the accusation remain. "I signed it," he said. Vossile's smile sharpened. Erynd continued. "I signed a record I did not question because it gave my court the alliance it wanted and my crown the ceremony it needed. I allowed Nyra Quen's flight right to be transferred, without asking why my own dragon would not look away from her. That fault is mine." The bronze rings turned slowly above him. Nyra looked at him, and something inside her resisted the old instinct to step away from a king's words before they became another kind of cage. This was not absolution. He had not asked her for forgiveness. He had named the wound in public and left it open. That was harder. Vossile heard the danger in it. He lunged toward Nyra. No one expected it. Not from a man bound by black fire and watched by dragons. But desperation made him fast. He seized a fallen skyhook bolt from the platform and dragged its hooked edge across the last smoking ribbon of harness, still tangled around Nyra's waist. "If the bride bleeds under the stolen harness," he shouted, "Aerie law will seal emergency transfer to House Thorn. Kill me if you like, Majesty. The harness will still leave Nyra." Nyra cried out as the hook bit the ribbon. Nyra moved, but Erynd was already between them. He caught the bolt bare-handed. The hook cut through his glove and into his palm. Blood ran over the torn harness ribbon, dark against gold thread. The bronze rings roared above them. Every dragon in the Aerie lifted its head. Royal blood had touched stolen flight right. Vossile laughed, breathless and triumphant. There, now crown claim overrides witness claim. For one terrible heartbeat, the law accepted the contact. The third sky clasp in Nyra's hand burned white. Then Orath lowered his skeletal head and breathed over Erynd's bleeding palm. The white fire turned black. The bronze rings carved new words across the open air for the entire capital to read. Crown claim cannot override stolen sky name. Trueflight witness must choose correction. Every eye turned to Nyra. Not to Erynd, not to Vossile, not to the bride. Nyra, the third clasp opened in her burned hands, waiting. Erynd looked at her across the broken ring, blood dripping from his palm onto the stone. "Tell me the correction," he said. Nyra's throat tightened around 6 years of swallowed names. She looked at Orath. At Vylor. At Nyra alive beneath torn silk. At Vossile's ruined confidence. At the court that had watched her bow under servant cord. At the capital hearing, her silence break in public air. Then she lifted the third sky clasp. The correction, Nyra said, begins with the crown giving back what it had no right to grant. The black crown ring at Erynd's throat split open. The black crown ring did not fall from Erynd Vale's throat. It opened like a wound. A thin crack split through the obsidian dragon bone, and black fire poured out beneath his jaw, bright enough for the entire capital to see. The court recoiled as if the crown itself had screamed. Erynd did not lift a hand to stop it. He stood in the broken wind ring with blood running from his palm, and let the law reach him. Vossile stared at the split ring. Majesty, do not answer that correction. Erynd looked at him once. You do not give orders in my sky. Then he turned to Nyra. Not to the court. Not to House Thorn. Not to the priests waiting for a royal command that would make the truth easier to carry. He turned to the woman who had been bound below the area as a dismissed servant, while her name burned hidden inside the harness he had given away. What must be returned? He asked. Nyra's fingers tightened around the third sky clasp. The question was simple. The answer had 6 years of ash behind it. My sky name, she said. My first flight. Right. The dead rider's landing record. The surviving dragon's return names. And every public law written from Vossile's false record. The bronze rings answered one by one, each giving a deep note that shook dust from the arches. Erynd lowered his bleeding palm to the cracked wind ring. Then let the crown record what the crown failed to ask. Black fire climbed from the stone into his hand. His body locked, but he did not pull away. I revoke the transfer of the Trueflight Harness to Lady Nyra Thorn, he said. I revoke the seal that named Nyra Quen handler only. I revoke every Aerie order built from the Black Sun correction entered by Sky Kartarch Vossile Wren. The third clasp opened in Nyra's hands, not gently. Its teeth unfolded, releasing strips of black fire that rose into the open air and began writing across every bronze arch. Nyra's name appeared first, not small, not hidden inside a lining, but vast enough for the capital below to read. Nyra Quen, Trueflight Witness. First right of the Trueflight Harness. No one cheered. That made it better. The silence was not doubt now. It was the sound of a court having to stand inside what it had done. Nyra Thorn struggled to her feet on the lower landing rail, pale, torn, alive. One of her attendants tried to cover the ruined riding gown with a white cloak. Nyra pushed it away. She looked up at Nyra through tears and shame. I wore it, she said. Nyra looked down at her. Yes, I knew it was yours. The admission broke House Thorn's gallery into whispers. Vossile snarled. Do not confess to what law has not required. Nyra flinched, but she did not look away from Nyra. I told myself court transfer made it clean. Nyra did not forgive her. Not in that moment. Forgiveness was not another garment for frightened nobles to borrow when consequence arrived. You are alive because the harness held you, Nyra said. Remember that before you ever call stolen honor harmless. Nyra bowed her head. The bronze rings turned again. Orath's skeletal body lowered fully into the Aerie. The dead dragon folded his bone wings with slow, terrible grace. Around him, the 43 rider names burned softer now, no longer striking, no longer searching for a body to blame. One by one, they descended into the cracked stone, not vanishing, but landing. Valor stepped beside Orath and touched his scarred forehead to the dead dragon's jaw. Erynd watched the gesture, and grief moved through his face before power could bury it. His dragon had not been disobedient. His dragon had been mourning, in a language the crown refused to learn. Vossile tried one final time. He tore free from the guard holding him and lunged toward the third sky clasp. If she seals it, the dragons will rule the crown. Nyra turned before he reached her. No, she said. The truth will. The clasp flashed. Black fire wrapped around Vossile's wrist, then his throat, then the scroll case still hanging from his belt. It did not burn his skin. It burned every false title written over his name. Sky Kartark peeled from him in ash. Keeper of Flight Law vanished. Protector of the Aerie blackened and fell away. What remained burned across the air. Vossile Wren. Removal witness. Western chain sealer. The dragons lowered their heads, not in honor, in judgment. Erynd stepped back. For a heartbeat, the court expected him to pass sentence. He had that right. He had used such rights all his life, but his gaze shifted to Nyra, then to Oreth, then to the surviving dragons whose names had returned with fire. This judgment belongs to the flight he abandoned, Erynd said. Vossile's composure shattered. Majesty. Oreth opened his skeletal jaws. No flame came. Only wind. Black sun wind, cold and final, filled with the last calls of riders Vossile had locked outside the sky. It wrapped around him, lifting him from the stone. He did not burn. He did not bleed. He was carried backward into the landing memory he had denied, forced to hear every name he had removed as the western chain closed around him. When the wind vanished, Vossile Wren was gone. Only his scroll case remained, split open and empty. The High Dragon Aerie breathed. Nyra almost fell when the law released her. Erynd moved, then stopped himself. The restraint mattered. He had reached for command all his life. Now he held still and let her decide whether his hand had any place near her. Nyra saw it. She hated that she saw it. She hated more that it mattered. She stepped out of the windring on her own. The third sky clasp cooled in her palm. Erynd bowed his head before her. The court gasped. Dragon kings did not bow to handlers. They did not bow to witnesses. They did not bow in public unless the mountain itself had cracked beneath them. Erynd did not rise quickly. I cannot undo the years you carried my silence, he said. I can only make sure no law in my crown carries it again. Nyra looked past him to Valor, to Orath, to the dragons waiting without command. Then she looked at the open balconies and the capital that had heard her name returned. The harness will not fly for ceremony, she said. Erynd lifted his eyes. It will fly for rescue, Nyra continued. For lost riders, for dragons denied landing, for sky, law that remembers the living before it honors the crown. A faint, broken warmth touched his face. Not triumph, relief shaped like surrender. As you command, he said. No, Nyra answered, as the law should have been. For the first time, something like a smile moved through Valor's scarred mouth. The great black dragon lowered himself until his neck touched the airy stone before Nyra, not offering worship, offering flight. Nyra climbed onto his back with the third sky clasp in her burned hand and the restored name blazing above her. Erynd remained below, one bloodied hand open, standing behind her where all the court could see he had not lifted her there, had not claimed what she earned, had not turned her return into his mercy. When Valor rose, the 12 dragons rose with him. Their wings filled the sky above the capital, not in royal formation, but in witness. Beneath them, the High Dragon Aerie rang every bronze bell it had, and this time, no name was missing from the sound.